Hi, and in this MicroVid, we're going to be continuing talking about a topic of respiration, and that is breathing mechanics. So today we're going to be covering the processes of inspiration and expiration, and specifically, we're going to be talking about the muscles involved in both of those. So let's talk about inspiration first. Let's move up. So inspiration is an active process, and the two main muscles involved in inspiration are the diaphragm and the external intercostals. So let's talk about the diaphragm first. Okay, so we have the diaphragm right here. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle. In the notes, you get more detail on exactly what the diaphragm, how it's shaped, and a little bit more detail. But let's draw the sides of the abdominal wall. Up here, you've got the thoracic cavity up there, and down here you have the abdominal cavity. Now, if we zoom in on the diaphragm, it's a dome-shaped muscle with anchor points on each sort of side right here, where it connects with the thoracic wall. And just like any muscle, when the diaphragm contracts, so this is a relaxed state, we'll say, when the diaphragm contracts, it actually gets shorter. And because it has those anchor points, when it gets shorter, it actually moves downward, as we can see right here. So we're going to get a downward movement. Now this does several things, which we're going to get into later. Number one, it's going to increase the volume in the thoracic cavity. It's going to increase the volume in the thoracic cavity. And this is going to enable us to undergo the process of inspiration, which we'll get to in later videos. But know right now, this is how the diaphragm works. It contracts. It's a dome-shaped muscle. It has a central tendon in the middle, right here. And it contracts, shortens in length, and becomes more straight. That is going to be one of the main muscles of inspiration. Now the next muscle, another main muscle of inspiration, is the external intercostals. So let's look at those. So right here I've drawn a black line. Envision this is the spine, and then coming off the spine you have ribs, like this. Okay, so here's part of your rib cage right there. And there we go, we'll draw that. So that's your rib cage, this is the spine. We'll just label it as that. And then you've got your rib cage coming off there. Now intercostals, that's intercostal, that means in between ribs. The intercostal muscles, I'm going to zoom in here. There are several different ones, and the external intercostals are important for inspiration. Now the external intercostals are going to be oriented obliquely towards the top of the spine. So they are oriented as such, like this. And once again, they're going to be oriented towards the top of the spine. So when these muscles contract, what's happening is with any muscle, you're decreasing the length of that muscle. So when they contract, you've got this rib right here moving closer to this rib because the muscles in between them are contracting. So you've got a movement like that, and then like the same thing for this next rib, like so. Now what this is going to do is it will cause an overall shift in the entire chest wall, to move towards that anchor point up here, thus causing the rib cage to move up. This once again is going to increase the thoracic volume. This will aid in inspiration. Okay, so those are the muscles, the main muscles of inspiration. Now there are some accessory muscles to inspiration that we can list here. So we've got accessory muscles, and these accessory muscles are usually only engaged during maximal inspiration or strenuous inspiration. They're not normally engaged in normal tidal breathing. However, the diaphragm and external intercostals are engaged in normal tidal breathing. So the accessory muscles are the sternocleidomastoid, the scalene muscle group, and the pectoralis minor. So these are the accessory muscles, once again, for inspiration that will be engaged if needed during very strenuous activity. Okay, so those are the inspiratory muscles. Let's look at expiration. So with expiration, one thing to note about expiration is it's mainly a passive process. You don't need to engage any muscles in order to exhale. All you need to do is relax the inspiratory muscles. So it's important to note that it is mainly passive. Very important to know that. However, there is something called a forced expiration that can occur. And this is when you are forcing air out in an active manner. This could be when you're breathing hard and you want to exchange large volumes of air quickly with the atmosphere. An example is if you're blowing a balloon up. You can't just passively blow up a balloon. You have to forcefully push air into that. And the muscles that are used with a forced expiration are the internal intercostals, and then also the abdominal muscles are engaged as well. So let's look at the internal intercostal muscles. So once again, we've got our spine. I'm going to draw, this is our spine, and we have our ribs coming off of the spine to form the rib cage right here. We'll draw that. The internal intercostal muscles are still in between. They're intercostal, so they're going to be in between the ribs. However, they're oriented in a different manner. They are still obliquely oriented. However, they're oriented towards the bottom or the inferior portion of the spine, lower than whereas the external intercostals are oriented. And what this does, as when any muscle, once again, any muscle contracts, it's going to shorten in length. What this does is it pulls, has an overall effect of pulling the rib cage towards this bottom, which towards the inferior portion of the spine, which is going to cause a decrease in the volume of the thoracic cavity. So for example, if you have the chest wall, I'm just drawing this out here, say the chest wall is that orientation, it's that far out. When you have contraction of the internal intercostal muscles, which are for expiration, you'll get a movement of that chest wall towards this sort of orientation right here. So this is a brief overview of the muscles of inspiration and expiration, and I hope this helps.